Hey, it's Tom from GreenShortz, and today I'm going to remake my DIY solo stove using comments from a viewer because he was right about a couple of things. I made this stove out of a couple of stainless steel pots and some fittings. I've been using it for a couple of years to primarily cook food, and it's been a lot of fun, and I really like the way this stove works. But let me read you some of Alex's comments here, and I'll get into what he was right about and then talk about how I'm gonna fix this stove today. I say fix, but this has worked just fine the way it is, but my inner pot is showing some signs of wear and tear, and that's what I'm going to replace today. So he says, "Good day, mate. I have a couple suggestions, and I will explain why below." His 2 cents here was that even stainless steel will rust after a few burnings, and that's definitely what I'm seeing on the inside pot there. Instead of screw and metal brackets, use ceramic as spacer at the bottom or sides. He says, "I've used 3 pieces of rock wool for this side air gap." Ceramic is a great idea, and what I'm going to use in place of my metal brackets there is actually a fire brick. I'm going to cut it though into L-shaped legs that will define the gap as well as support the inner pot. And the last thing he said was, "I use ceramic as my burn pot. I don't see why a ceramic pot cannot do the job." I'm actually not going to do that because I want a metal pot inside, because I want that heat to be able to radiate through the sides, help heat the air in the gap between the 2 pots, and comes back in to provide that secondary burn. I'm going to disassemble the stove here, taking out these 3 screws that hold the 2 pots together with the brackets. Now you're gonna see why Alex was right. So my inner pot there had pretty much failed. Even the bottom, when I was pushing on it to get it out, cracked through. It's just thin-walled steel, stainless steel. It's just, you know, for an $8 pot, is not gonna last under that high temperature. Certainly fire without any kind of liquid in it. I'm gonna go scavenge a fire brick from an old project. Here's an old Cobb J-tube stove that kind of neglected. You can watch the video on making that if you're interested. Put a link to it here. And I think I can use this piece of thin fire brick to make the 3 brackets. You could probably use a concrete paver to do this too. You can get these thin fire brick at Ace Hardware. I think you can also special order them from Home Depot, or find them at a building materials yard. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's going to be hidden anyway. Just getting the debris off. Got a recycling bin underneath here to catch the scrap. Pretty sure it's aluminum. Someone was questioning why you'd have aluminum rivets on a stainless steel pot. One, it's a lot more malleable to pop that in there, and that little rivet's not going to take a lot of heat, not enough to melt aluminum. Certainly when you're boiling water, but it certainly drills a lot more like aluminum. It's soft. Not drilling these all the way through, just enough to get the handle off. To measure for my spacers, I'm going to put the small pot inside the big pot. This air gap could be a lot more narrow than it is. It's about 1 inch. But I'm working with the size of pots I can get a hold of. I think this is 8 quart, this is 12 quart. The air won't heat up as much as it would if the gap was smaller, but it will work just fine. Step height looks like it's going to be about 2 1/4, but I want a gap at the top, so we'll call it 2 inches from the bottom there. But I'm going to have 1.5 inches of leg raising up the bottom pot. Need to measure up from the bottom here, 1.5 inches of foot, and then 2 inches, or basically the pedestal where this is going to sit. I'll give it 1 inch of width to sit on. Actually, let's taper that. That'd be kind of cool. And then I probably don't need that much. I'm going to do 1.25 inches, or I'll give it 1.5 inches of rise on the spacer. I'm going to cut this profile out and see how it fits. The outside pot will come in right about there. Inside pot then sits right there. I'm going to use some 1/2 inch spacers to support the pot. Put my gap in place. Check this around. It's going to work just right. And now I'm going to cut 3 of these out of the fire brick. Okay, I think I need to shorten it up just a little bit so I can get them across the brick this way. Then I think I can get all 3. If I try and piece it in like this, I think I'm going to end up with not enough. So I'm going to cheat a little on my leg height and cheat a little on the tab sticking up here, and I think that'll be fine. Although I'm going to modify this template so I don't end up with different sized legs. I've had this workmate since 1993. It's been a workhorse. I think they're still making them. Alright. Haha, perfect. Look at that. It's almost like I planned it. I'm definitely going to mask up to cut this. Don't want to be breathing this stuff. And I'm going to cut this using a masonry disc in my grinder. Eyes and ears and mask, JW. This fire brick will actually cut really nicely. It's pretty soft compared to a clay brick. I'm going to get a second point of contact here. I'm going to cut all my lines from one side and then turn it over and finish the cuts. And now I'll finish out the notches. The disc is getting too shallow to cut all the way through, so I'm having to knock it out and then clean it up. Success! A nice snug fit. I'm happy with that. So you need to check and see where this hole lines up. See if it's far enough down on that tab to not crack it. That's not a lot of space. I'd really like the hole to be that much further down. I'm gonna go ahead and drill a second hole here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and mark and drill my second holes. I'm gonna number these because they'll be a little bit different. Need to put it back where they were marked. A comment I got on the last video when I made this stove initially was that I was running my drill bit too fast. So I'm gonna try and drill this out a little more slowly. Put my speed on 1. Slow speed seemed to work nicely. All right, now I'm gonna reassemble. I'm gonna mark and then drill each hole through the legs using a masonry bit. Take the leg out and finish the hole. I'm gonna drill the rest of these. Now I'm gonna drill the holes in the inner pot. You can see my little mark there, and hit it with the center punch and then drill. Need to cool this bit down. Actually, that drill bit really acted more like a punch. I think I'm just gonna try and punch through here. So if I can punch through first with the screw, which is hardened steel, got a nice point on it, and then I'll use this nail set to widen the hole out to the size that I need. I'm gonna rotate this around here to get closer to the 4x4. Alright, that worked pretty well. And the last one right here. Alright. Now while I have this out, I'm actually going to put a row of holes around the bottom of the stove. So I'm going to avoid the areas where the legs will be. And then I'm going to do a row of holes about this high. Of course, these are smaller than the ones I did last time, so I'm gonna do more of them. To punch my holes, I'm gonna use the same method that I just used with the screw to start, but I'm gonna finish it up with this punch because I wanna get a pretty wide hole here. But I also need to make a cavity underneath for the punch to go into. So let me drill that out real quick. Alright, that's messy on the inside, but I like how fast that was. And given that this pot is probably going to burn out just like the last one did in a year or so, I'm okay with this being rough and ready fix. I'm going to do an intermediate step with the nail set just to get a little wider.
Not exactly pretty, but it's going to be out of sight, and it'll get the job done.
And now to assemble. The numbers got wiped off the bottom, but let's figure it out. Trial and error. Thankfully, these aren't all spaced equally, so I can figure out where they're supposed to go based on the spacing. Alright, that's it right there. And the reason I like using 3 legs is because it doesn't wobble. So 4 legs, you gotta get them all exactly the same size. But 3 legs, it's always gonna stand like a tripod, even if it's a millimeter or 2 off level. Now I'm gonna secure the legs with bolts, nuts, and washers. And this is 1.25 inches. I would have liked to have had 1.5 inches. I think this is gonna just fit. I'm not gonna have much room to spare. Use the thread here to help get through the inner pot where it's a little bit rough. Just enough thread. I am going to get some 1.5 inch bolts here so I can get the washers on, but I've got the nuts secured for now, and that'll at least let me fire it up. I'm gonna load this up with my favorite alternative fuel, pistachio shells. Gonna add some sticks as well. Alright, I'm gonna light it up. As the fire heats up, air is going to start moving up between the 2 pots using convection, and it will be injected back in the top of the combustion there. You can see a little bit of that happening on the right side and the back there. Flames kind of licking over the top of the inner pot from that side channel. In the bottom of the combustion pot there, you can see air being pulled in for combustion through the holes that were punched in the side of the inner pot, and that air current will help consume the fuel on the bottom of the burn chamber. It burns some of the fuel and then gasifies some of the fuel, which is then burned using the oxygen coming in on the top. Let's see how big I can get this fire. Zoom out. Bad boy's big. You can definitely see the secondary burn happening. Good bit of the combustion happening when the side channel air meets the top of the burn pot. Of all the stoves I've made, I use this one the most. And I primarily use it for cooking, just because it burns so hot. It's a controlled fire, and I can use alternative fuels like pistachio shells, pine cones, and sweet gumballs. And it's burning all of those fuels and sticks and twigs really efficiently, and that makes this stove green, and that makes me happy. So thanks, Alex, for your comments on how I can improve this stove. I make projects as I see them in my head, but I love ideas and suggestions from the comments as well. As always, my mission here at GreenShortz is to help you see green so you can be green, and save a little green by doing it yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Saturday.